Hey, welcome to the Chris and Ryan Credo Report. We're your hosts, Chris and Ryan. So just take this time to sit back, relax, and for the next 45 minutes, enjoy. No, sorry. This is not smooth jazz.
I felt like I needed to take a bubble bath or something. What was that all about?
I just went into smooth jazz mode
That
for
was
some
very
reason.
strange.
I don't know why.
Very strange.
So, actually, we have some interesting things to talk about, which is why we have a podcast. Mm-hmm. And I
don't know, some podcasts I even some of the ones I watch, I'm like,
yeah,
this is not interesting, but I can't look away.
Well, if that keeps viewers, then whatever works.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I do watch some interesting podcasts too. But anyways, you had mentioned this is not a topic. So a lot of times we kind of focus on a news story, one particular news story, which we do have one for the end.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But this one's more of a topic of stuff that you've been having people messaging you about.
Right.
Yeah. So tell us what you got going on there.
Well, this is an interesting time right now in our nation, right? And it's often people think that I only get questions about religious things.
Yeah. I also get questions about dinosaurs.
Oh, I always want to talk to you about dinosaurs. That's beside the point.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So it's not just religious. Although I look at everything through that lens, right? Mm-hmm. But this, I've been getting a lot of messages lately about the political climate in our nation.
It's hot.
There is so much happening.
Yeah.
I was asked by one person, "Is this it? Is this the end?" And I'm like, "No, this is not the end. This is just another level of crazy." I have a friend who works for the same missions agency that I work with, and he and I have just been going back and forth via text, sending each other articles from. I don't know. I'm so confused. Do I call it X or Twitter?
X.
Okay.
It is X.
Now, what do you do when you post something? We used to call it a tweet. Do we say I post an X?
I don't know. I don't even have an account.
I don't know.
So this is the wrong. When you do social media, I'm the wrong person to be talking to about that. I kind of, yeah.
So we've been sending articles or posts from there and news articles back and forth. Watching the debate and then watching all of the press conferences and just all the things that are going on. I mean, you can't get. I don't think in my lifetime there's been a crazier time politically than there is right now.
Well, it's definitely more divided
than
we've ever seen. And like, I used to think, so like when I was growing up, I always looked at it like both the Democrats and the Republicans sort of had the same end goal in mind, which was, advance our company, let's improve our education, let's improve our economy, let's do this. But we disagreed about the route that we get there.
Right.
And so, maybe like a good example of that would be care for the poor. And the Democrats really looked at welfare programs and governments coming in to make programs that would help the
basically take care of
less fortunate and take care of them. Whereas the Republicans were like, empower organizations to come along. Right. And do that, and so get your Salvation Armies and churches and things like that to do it, and don't have it at a federal level. And there's a really good example using peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that people use sometimes to demonstrate why you would want to do it.
Is it grape jelly?
Yes, always grape jelly.
Yep. See, there you go.
It had something to do with like if you're a person and you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like I don't remember it exactly, but like say. As a person, if I buy bread, I buy peanut butter, I buy jelly, I'm going to spend like $8 because I have to buy all this stuff to make one sandwich. But then if the government does it because there's so many people, they can do it for much cheaper. And that's the argument for welfare. The problem is when you start including red tape and bureaucracy and all this stuff, the price actually exceeds the cost of an individual making a sandwich. So then you go to an organization like Salvation Army that doesn't have the bureaucracy,
right?
But also contains the bulk they end up doing it cheaper. So anyways, stupid thing. You can look that up, but
I want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich now.
I don't know why I'm off onto welfare and things like that. But the idea was back in my childhood, we were all going to say, let's take care of the poor, but we just disagreed on how.
Right.
And so if a different party won and got in power, you were like, well, it's not the best, but hopefully later we'll fix it. Now it feels like it's end of the world if the wrong party gets in place because we're so divided, we don't even have end goals in mind.
Right. And you know, I wanted, the one thing I wanted to say as we're having this conversation and as we move forward is to be clear, we are not taking any political stance at the moment through this. I bet
they'll figure it out.
Other than we're going to look at everything through the lens of the Bible because that's what we do. But like you jokingly said, I bet they'll figure it out. But let's be real.
Yeah.
We're two guys.
Mm-hmm.
We're white.
I don't think
we're
that
conservative. We're Christian.
Yes.
I mean, you add all these things together, at least from what we're told in the media.
Mm-hmm.
You add all these things together, you're going to arrive at a conclusion. And I don't know if your conclusion will be wrong.
You're probably not.
So
one of the things that you said to me is that the government is out of control and we're in very unstable times. Like people feel like we're in unstable times, like it's uncertain.
Yeah.
And there's this veil of uncertainty. And so I kind of had locked onto that word stable. And, you know, Jesus said that if you build on my words and on my commandments, then you are building on stable ground. It's a firm foundation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when the winds blow and the rains beat.
Whereas if we look at the news media right now, they would convince us that we're walking across the top of Jell-O.
Yes. Yeah. So anyways, so my thoughts are, well, we are in unstable times, and I would say the result of it is because we've completely thrown out the commands of God. And so I think there's nothing probably more telling with that than the way that they've treated the Ten Commandments. You know, first it was displayed everywhere. It's engraved into courtrooms, so a lot of those can't be removed. But they've done their best to get them out of schools, out of courts, out of government buildings, out of everything. Now you got places like Oklahoma that said, we want to put it back in. And we even have Christians that are getting upset about that because they're afraid that that's going to open up the door for other religions to post their stuff.
Yeah.
And, but so at one point we built things like our justice system was built on the Ten Commandments. That's why we have most of the laws that we have is because there's some form of the Ten Commandments. But we've tried our best to get rid of them. And as we've gotten rid of them, we're starting to see things like the way we treat crime is so different now.
Yeah, you know, in California, right now, they're not convicting anybody for shoplifting if it's less than like $900.
$950.
So you could
I think
walk
that's in San Francisco, though.
You could walk in to your local Walmart and pull a $500 TV off the wall and walk out with it. It's totally acceptable.
Now, do they count your parking pass in that? Because right there in San Fran, you're already over the 950. Sorry. But what I was going to say is you could go through, and I'll just do it real quick, or the two of us can do this real quick.
Yeah.
And show how every single one of the Ten Commandments are purposefully violated. I think we're doing it, and just to be honest, we're going to do this off the top of our heads. It's almost like a hot take.
Well, kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of.
Here we go.
Maybe I should throw the intro. Number one is thou shalt have no other gods before me. Well, the Republican National Convention opened day 2 with a prayer to Walamuth or something.
The sick god.
Yeah, the sick god. He is sick. I'll tell you that right now. If you look that god up, he demands child sacrifices.
I don't know enough about the Sikh religion.
I didn't think that was part of the Sikh religion, but I mean, that was in there. So
wow.
But regardless, even if he's a very friendly god, you know, he's not God.
Right.
He's a false god. So right there, that was done by the more conservative of the parties. The party actually called the Conservative Party.
The elephants.
Right. So that's just one example. And like I said, we're not going to get exhaustive. We're just going to give like one example. But hey, they're inviting that into the National Convention.
Opening what was it, day two?
Day two. Yeah. Let's see, what's command number 2? You shall not make any graven images before me. We did a show where it wasn't the government doing it, but they put up like a demon statue in a courthouse.
But the government allowed it.
Yeah, the government allowed it. But I can tell you right now that in Arizona, in Illinois, and about 6 other states have added into their courtrooms satanic either statues or emblemology, which I'm guessing emblemology just means like they stuck a
Little emblems.
an emblem somewhere.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and then they were trying to do it in Oklahoma. I don't know why you would.
Why would you try that in Oklahoma?
Why would you try that in Oklahoma?
What about Oklahoma says? You know what the Okies will really love?
What?
Satanic symbols.
Yeah,
who thought that?
they're the one play. They don't make as much noise as like Florida, but they're more conservative than Florida is.
Yeah.
So there's the graven images, and there's probably more examples of that. I'm sure many statues and artworks and things being done. Let's see. Command number 3 is you should not use the Lord your God's name in vain. Now, I'm not going to do a teaching on the 10 Commandments right now, but I don't think that that's talking about going like just
There's
saying.
2 ways to look at this, and I think we've not talked about this before, but I think you and I look at it the same. The first way that most people look at it is if you say, "Oh God," that would be taking the Lord's name in vain. Mm-hmm. I don't lean toward that one, right? I don't lean toward that one. The second one is if you claim God in something or God's direction,
Right.
God said to do this or God believes this, and that would be taking the Lord's name in vain. That's actually more along the lines of what I believe.
Right.
That the Lord's telling us.
Yes.
Basically God's saying, don't use my name.
Right.
So,
and that's what I was going to say is that we've seen that with, like, how many times has, like, just recently, right before Biden announced that he wasn't going to be seeking the ticket, he went and spoke at a church, a black church, where he recounted his story of growing up in black church and all this stuff. But he clearly said that God has set forth this path of stuff. And I've heard them evoke that God is the one who is desiring for abortion to happen.
right.
Which is insane. But anyways, yeah. So they're using the Lord's name in vain all over the place. Mm-hmm. Then we come to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Now, again, without going into a teaching, that's not saying, well, number one, it's definitely not saying Sunday has to be, and it's not saying Saturday has to be a day of observation. Regardless, I don't think anyone in the government is really doing that anyways.
Yeah.
But what that's really referring to is then there's a passage in Hebrews where it talks about entering into the rest of God and what that means. And that's where essentially it's saying you lay aside your own striving and your own agenda and your own desires, and you allow the Holy Spirit to do that through you so that you're not the one doing the work. Mm-hmm. You're resting, and God does it through you. Well, I think that by just taking a look at any of the agendas that any of the platforms have, like that's not happening.
Yeah, and
Clearly.
No.
Then we come to honor your father and mother. Well, surely Biden's parents aren't alive.
I mean,
I would like to. He's 80 something. I mean, like
he's 81.
Yeah. So, but he's not only the government. There's everyone there. I'll give you a good example of how we've not been doing that. They have been trying to pass bills to get euthanasia enacted so that anyone who just has any type of grievance with their parents getting elderly and don't want to care for them can just simply euthanize them. And it wouldn't require the permission of the person being euthanized.
Yeah.
Like once they hit a certain age.
I mean,
now those bills have not passed yet that I'm aware of.
I don't think so. But, there's all kinds of ways to look at honoring the father and the mother. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, just things like when we talk about the what gets people calling for me to be burned at the stake is when I start talking about abortion, right?
Right.
Through abortion, the father is not honored at all.
No.
So I mean, just there's different ways to look at honor your father and your mother, honor the fathers and mothers.
Well, that's true. There's a lot of policies being made that basically are against the nuclear family.
Exactly.
So that would be very dishonoring to mothers and fathers to say that, hey, mothers and fathers aren't even needed. Mm-hmm. Or how about how many times classrooms have passed laws and policies saying that children can do trans things without giving any type of parental notification.
Right. As a matter of fact, the school will help hide that. That's not honoring the father and the mother.
Now, granted, that's not your father and mother, but we're not holding fathers and mothers in esteem.
Right. And if we as like if the pastors, leaders, teachers, administrators, looking at the school and the church, looking at it all together, if we are not demonstrating that honor to the kids and the kids won't. So we're basically teaching the converse of honor your father and mother. We're teaching dishonor them.
Right.
And then we're shocked when kids dishonor their parents.
Yeah. Number 6, maybe you could help us out on this. Number 6 is you should not murder.
Well, like I just said, people want to burn me at the stake for this one. Abortion. That's the one that comes to me right away. That is murder. It just is. Mm-hmm.
You're killing a human life.
Yeah, there's no way to get around it. And then you're looking at things like we're hearing about all of these shootings. It's just normal thing for people to shoot each other.
Yeah. Now I'm looking specifically at like the government doing it, and without getting into conspiracy theories that may or may not prove true, we're going to say that the government is not going around just shooting people.
We're going to hope.
That's going to be our official podcast stance.
There you go.
Okay, do not murder, do not lie. Is that next? Where am I? Number 7? So some of these may or may... No, that's not next. Don't steal. Mm-hmm. Do not steal is next. Well, what about these policies like you were just talking about, where we're legalizing theft?
Right, like we're talking about, like I said, California... It's as long as you're not taking as above a certain amount, they're not going to prosecute it. That is.
You could also just look at like the BLM riots and how they were absolutely praised for stealing sneakers and things in the name of.
I saw one where this guy went and stole a vacuum.
Yeah,
but it's. And all these people were like, they're taking back what was taken from them. Nobody stole a vacuum from that man.
No.
Yeah. So.
Right. And especially that store didn't steal that vacuum from that man.
Right. Target never came to your house and took your vacuum.
Right.
So we're condoning it.
Yeah. We're absolutely. Or I guess Kamala Harris did the help bail people out of prison who went to prison for stealing.
Right.
And so she actively was pursuing to get people out of prison for who were committing real crimes. Mm-hmm. So, we're seeing that it doesn't have the same weight that it used to have. So after what is that? That was number 7. So we have 8, 9, and 10 left. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't be doing this from memory. My problem is, one of the problems is I don't know if I can get the order right. But I know number 10 is covet. I think number 9 is lying. Don't bear false witness against your neighbor. So number 8 is do not commit adultery. And we could just say that it's adultery. I don't know how much that's been going on throughout all different types of leadership within all people in the government. But I'll tell you this, as late as 1940, I want to say it was McKinney, but I can't remember for sure. He was a presidential hopeful, presidential candidate. And he was in a staggering lead in the polls, back when we trusted polls. And he was in a staggering lead. And then word came out that he committed adultery. And he did not even wait to see what that would do to the polls. He came forward And he stepped down and said, I am no longer fit to be the president of this country because I can't be looked to as a moral leader because he committed adultery. Now you got Bill Clinton in the office with Monica Lewinsky. You got all kind of...
I read an article the other day that it listed off presidents in the past like 40 years that had any adulterous things, and I was surprised by who was on that list. But the point is it's not unheard of
to have adultery.
Yeah,
no, it's not unheard of at all. We got rampant examples going all throughout government,
right?
So they're not holding that. But if you were to even go and look at that command in a much looser text than that and say, like, do not commit sexual immorality, then the laws that are being put in place now, well, I'm not even going to get into that. But we have things like, again, I'll pick on Kamala because she just became the Democrat nominee.
Can we say their nominee?
Not with that speech you gave at the beginning. and she did her first public televised appearance of announcing that she's the Democrat ticket on RuPaul's Drag Race.
Is that what it is? I don't know.
Yeah, but it's a show about being drag queens. Yeah, they call it Drag Race because it could confuse you if you're like a guy that's like really into cars. Be like, ooh.
And then you go, oh, you go from ooh to oh.
Yeah. So obviously there's a promoting of this lifestyle, obviously within the government.
Right.
And so it shows that there's no regard for the sexual conduct of the Bible.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now we're on number 9, which is don't bear false testimony against your neighbor.
Don't lie.
Don't lie.
Yeah.
They're politicians. Do you have to say anything more than that?
It feels, you know what? It's like, I try really hard not to make those cynical remarks, but it feels like there's no other way.
If you want to hold that to its absolute verbatim highest standard, it doesn't actually say don't lie. It says do not bear false testimony against your neighbor. And you could say, well, bearing false testimony only indicates things like perjury. Well, we can look at the January 6th trials. We can look at the indictments against Trump. We can look at the things that have happened in various court procedures. You ever watch one of those C-SPAN congressional hearings where they're grilling someone like they just did with the lady that's the head of the Secret Service?
Was.
She retired because of crazy lies. Like, oh, well, we couldn't put them on there because the roof was too sloped. I'm going to tell you, the funniest thing, did you see the 70-year-old congressman filmed himself walking on the roof at 70 years old and was like, hey, here's me doing it.
Yeah.
But your Secret Service agents are not fit enough, apparently. That was hilarious. I'm sorry. That was hilarious. The whole situation is not hilarious.
But
being 70 years old and going up on a roof and walking on it to show it's not that hard.
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So perjury's happening. And then the last one.
Do not covet.
Yeah, do not covet. As far as I can tell, the government covets all of my possessions.
All the money, anyway.
Their taxes keep going up and up and up. Mm-hmm. There's other things put in place to try to get information on us, do stuff like, yeah. So all I'm going to say, that was probably more time than we needed to spend on it. But we have totally thrown out God's commandments and laws, totally, and have no regard for him. There is no fear of the Lord in this country.
Right. And we're
on a government level.
Right. And when we talk about that, like where you were putting that in is, of course, we're going to feel like we're in uncertain times.
Yeah.
Because we're not honoring God.
Right.
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 So, and that's where we're kind of driving at is it's uncertain. We know it is. Mm-hmm. We watch, read, look at the news. However you're consuming your news, whether it's
do we consume news? I get my news through not the B,
not the B. So I have so many different ways to get the news, but still, like we see it all, and there's not certainty.
No.
It's a crazy time. So how do we approach this I just want to take a few minutes
Yeah.
and talk about how do we, because that's the question I'm getting. How do we as Christians live in uncertain times?
Right.
What's it like?
Yeah.
Because
Fortunately, the Bible has some answers because when the New Testament was written,
it was uncertain.
they were in a worse government situation than we've ever been a part of.
Yeah. So I just wanted to look at a few things and like using the lens of the Bible and Christian principles, right? Biblical Christian principles.
Yeah.
How do we operate in uncertain times? Because the last thing that we want to do as conservative Christian followers of the way, like whatever label you want to put on us, basically those of us that are chasing after Jesus, how's that? We don't want to feed into the uncertainty. We don't want the uncertainty to rule us. We really should be operating in a way that that we bring peace through this uncertainty. Because I'll agree, it is uncertain. I am uncertain what's going to happen with all of this. But that doesn't mean I have to be losing my mind, you know?
Right.
And just because I'm going to give these three things, it's three principles. Just because I'm going to give those doesn't mean we stop reading the news. It doesn't mean that we stop following. It doesn't mean we don't vote. It doesn't mean we don't care about all those things. We still do that. But how do we do those things?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And I know why you have 3 points.
Why is that?
You used to be a pastor.
Yeah. If you notice, I always have 3. If it's not 3, it feels weird to me.
One time, I'm sorry, this is trailing, but I one time was just about to preach. And this is not at my church. I was the associate pastor at a church. And I was just about to preach, about to go up, and a guy approached me. And he said, "So you're about to preach?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Man, I sure hope you don't have a 3-point sermon," because he said, I can tell you right now, anyone who has a 3-point sermon did not listen to the Holy Spirit, did not listen to God, because they always do 3-point sermons. And like, God is not confined to any particular number. And I was thinking,
why would you say this to me right before I go up there and preach?
I know, but I looked at him, I said, turns out you're in luck. I have a 7-point sermon.
Sometimes I'll do 5. But I generally do 3.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is when I was learning about writing messages to preach on Sundays, it was said to me, we have 3 points because we have a triune God.
Really?
Yeah.
I just feel like,
and it was probably 10 years later. I'm like, that's probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Yeah. We have 3 points because actually people like the rule of thirds. Honestly, it's just a pleasing number. But the way I do it is, and I know we'll get back to this, but the way I do it is I just say however many points are needed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I do. I just know. So I made that joke because you said you had 3 points.
I do.
And I know they teach that in school.
Yeah.
How to preach.
So
3 points.
Number one.
When
living in uncertain times, do not live in fear.
I should have worn my fear, not my live by faith, not by fear shirt.
You failed. But so,
wow.
So don't live in fear, right?
Yeah.
And we pull this from 2 Timothy, chapter number 1.
You may pull from 2 Timothy. I pull it from 2 Timothy.
Chapter 1, verse number 7.
Chapter 1st.
Verse
number 7. No,
and I'm reading out of the New Living Translation.
Thank you.
For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but power, love, and self-discipline.
Yeah.
I mean, the very first one that when Paul was writing this, the very first thing he said is God hasn't given us a spirit of fear.
Right.
I think it's, when I read these verses, Paul's intentional with the way he lists things off. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just a willy-nilly like, don't, this and that, and that's a good one, and don't forget about that. That's not the way he did it. It was intentional. And so it's very purposeful that the very first thing he said is don't fear.
Yeah.
God, that's not from God. So we don't live in fear because God doesn't put fear in us. So if God doesn't put fear in us and there's fear, where does that fear come from? Something other than God.
Yep.
So we don't want to live in fear at all.
Yeah.
And also when we live in fear, we do silly things.
That's true.
So, we want to don't live in fear. We want to live in power. We want to live in love, self-discipline. Some people say power,
Sound
love, and a
mind.
sound mind.
Yeah.
Some say control. But that all means the same thing, really.
It basically means you're able to reason.
Right.
Yeah. We should be able to reason, look at stuff and reason. But I'll tell you what the best thing to reason here is. We don't have a spirit of fear, but we do have a spirit of power and of love, right? And of sound mind or
Yeah,
whatever.
and in this, Paul is really contrasting fear and power.
Yeah.
When you live in fear, you're giving up power.
Right. So let's say you're troubled because we have an uncertain economy, which turns out
We kind of
we kind of do. Well, does that matter if God is your provider? Well, it matters if you don't trust that God is your provider and you trust that if you believe that you can only prosper and do okay if the economy says that you're going to prosper and do okay, perhaps your trust is not in God as your provider.
perhaps.
Perhaps. And so if your trust is in the economy, then watching your 401k bounce around like a children's toy and watching the stock market do its thing and hearing government reports and stuff will put fear into you.
Right.
But if you believe in the power of God, that if he says, hey, consider the lilies of the field who have neither spun nor toiled, and yet Solomon and all of his all of his garb was never arrayed as fine as one of these. If we believe the words of Jesus, then we have power.
Right.
And guess what that power does? No fear. If God is my provider, I'm not afraid of the economy collapsing.
And I ask people, Christians specifically,
Apply that to other things.
when they're telling me, I'm afraid, and I'll ask them, you're afraid. I understand. We've all been afraid sometimes.
Sure.
But the question is do you have the love of God? And they always say, oh, well, yeah. Is it perfect? Oh, well, yeah, the love of God is perfect. Well, you know what the scriptures tell us? Perfect love casts out fear.
Yep. Yeah. If you truly believe that God loves you, like a father loves his children, which is what the Bible says too.
Right.
It also says the father gives good gifts to his children. Then we don't have to fear, what if they start making it illegal for Christians to exist in church and stuff? And we put all these things out there. Like, I trust in God.
Yeah.
I trust in God. God loves me. And so that drives out that fear.
Yeah. So we don't want to live in fear.
Right.
Right? Number two.
Number two.
Always trust God.
It's almost like if you trusted him, you wouldn't have that fear.
Right. See how these all
Yeah,
they basically pile upon one each other. And the verse that I pulled, and if you've been in church at all in your life, you have read this verse.
Is it from Proverbs?
You are so wise, my good friend.
Is it from 3,
You want to guess the verse?
4, and 5?
I went with 5, but yeah.
Okay. I usually tie them together. I don't know why, but
So Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean to your own understanding. That's the
Or
English
5
Standard
and
Version.
6, I guess.
Yeah.
In all your ways, acknowledge him.
And he
Will
shall direct your path.
paths. Yeah.
Yeah. But trust in the Lord with all your heart. Think about that. If we reject fear, and because we say, nope, that God doesn't give us a spirit of fear, he gives us a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And then we say, our next thing is that, all right, I'm going to walk in power. What's the first thing I do in power? I trust in God with all of my heart.
Yeah. And you know how you know you're doing it? When you keep reading and lean not on your own understanding.
Right.
My understanding of these things tells me this, but my trust in God tells me this. Which path do you take?
Right. And as we're talking about these political things, right? I grabbed another verse.
Just grabbed it.
Just grabbed it. But I grabbed another verse because I wanted to specifically apply how do I trust God
Yeah.
in this area,
Okay.
right? As I believe that Romans 13 is true. And Romans 13 says, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. If you're really going to trust God, no matter who's sitting at what desk, in what office, making what laws, you're going to trust that the authorities that exist are appointed by God. God put them there for some reason.
So you're telling me that Biden was appointed by God?
I am going to say that I trust God and that I trust what Paul wrote in Romans 13:1, and it says the authorities that exist are appointed by God. I'm going to trust God.
So
I don't have to like it. I have to trust him.
So can you think of any example in the Bible where there would have been like some evil ruler who was put in place?
I mean,
because
maybe
of God?
possibly.
Like maybe someone from Daniel's time.
It could be.
I mean, the Bible actually says Nebuchadnezzar was appointed by God and used by God.
Right.
And he was the guy who took Israel captive.
Right. And if we go back to Judges, where we would see that Israel would sin and then God would allow the other nations to come crush them.
Yeah.
And rule over them.
Yeah.
I mean, hello?
You know, when the
Just because God's in control does not mean it's going to be roses and lilies all the time.
yeah. In fact, God himself put down all the prophecies that said that Herod would be there when Jesus was born. He put down the prophecies that said that, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Antioch, whatever the guy that destroyed the temple in AD 70.
Oh, yes. Yes.
He's prophesied in Daniel.
Right.
Epiphanies or something like that. Antioch Epiphanies. No, it's not Antioch. That's a city.
We're just going to...
I cannot say his name.
I'm going to let you go with it.
Antioches. No.
It sounds like you're trying to say Annie Oakley, so let's move on.
So he prophesied that Annie Oakley was... I don't remember the dude's name. He is the guy that's like the Old Testament Antichrist.
Right.
That the Maccabees took down.
Exactly.
He's prophesied and was put in place. And there's actually a verse in the Bible in Daniel that says that Alexander the Great was probably not actually all that great. But he conquered all the things that he did because God handed those countries over to him to fulfill his word.
If we
crazy.
truly believe that everything, the earth and everything in it belong to the Lord,
Yeah.
He's going to do what he's going to do. And
Right.
we just have to trust him.
Right. Because God's plan is God's plan.
And you know what? It's okay for us to say, I'll pray sometimes, God, I trust you, but I don't understand you.
Yeah, that is okay too. I also will pray, God, I trust you, but please remove this person from power.
But you know, the whole idea of I trust you, but I don't understand you is really me not leaning in my own understanding.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and then the third thing, put your hope in the right place.
Yes.
You know, so often we put our hope in a political party and a political candidate, in an election cycle, in all of these things. That's not where we're supposed to put our hope. Where we should put our hope is Isaiah, book of Isaiah, chapter 40, verse number 31. I'm reading out of the Amplified on this one. And it said, "But those who wait for the Lord, who expect, look for, and hope in him, shall change and renew their strength and power. They shall lift their wings and mount up close to God as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint or become tired." I love the beginning, but those who wait for the Lord, who expect, look for, and hope in him.
Yeah,
God is where our hope should be.
definitely.
You know, so if we refuse to live in fear, if we say I'm going to trust God, then we put our hope in him. Yeah. And that's really the answer for us as followers of the way is I'm not going to live in fear, not going to do it, and I'm going to trust God. And once I trust him, then I can put my hope in him. Yeah. Because our hope represents the future.
Yes.
We believe good things will come in the future. So if we start hoping, the good future comes from God and God alone.
So you mentioned our hope is in the future.
Right.
Right. And a lot of people actually don't understand the biblical definition of hope. Because when we think of hope, if we use hope in just walking around town or whatever, and I say, you know, oh man, I hope such and such happens. I hope I win the lottery tonight. Yeah. Or whatever.
I hope I get a good deal on these shoes.
Yeah. We're saying I have no idea, but I just kind of wish that this is going to happen. And that's not biblical hope. Biblical hope is an assuredness of something that hasn't happened yet.
Exactly.
So, in other words, like say you're a kid and you come down on the night before Christmas and you open up one of your packages and you see that you got Optimus Prime. I'm not saying this is a real story, but let's say that you opened up a box and you saw it was Optimus Prime and then you retaped it back together and then you go to bed and you said, I hope tomorrow I get Optimus Prime. That's biblical hope.
Right.
You know it's there. You hope. What people get confused is they start to think that that's faith. But the difference is what hope and faith are almost the same thing. But faith is rooted in the past. I have faith that I'm righteous because of work that Jesus did in the past. I have hope of my future in heaven because I'm not there yet. I'm not there, but they have the same assuredness. I just brought that up as a little moment. Little moment.
Little something. Something.
Ryan's fireside teaching moment.
There you go.
With no fire.
Again, I'll say it one more time and then we'll move on because you have something for us to talk about.
I do.
So don't live in fear.
Right.
Trust God. Put your hope in the right place. That's where I'm going to tell you.
Yes.
So Ryan.
Yes. It's time for it. We haven't done it in a couple of episodes.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
I think it's 4 or 5 episodes since we've done the
Heresy Hunt.
Dun dun dun.
We don't have a clip for today's Heresy Hunt like we normally would do.
Right. This one was from an article.
Yeah, just an article.
From your favorite news source.
Yeah, not the B.
Not the B.
So this doctor, Dr. Sherry.
Dr. Reverend.
Dr. Reverend. I get the doctor part. I don't understand why she's a reverend with her beliefs. But anyway, she says, Sherry DeNovo, Dr. Reverend Sherry DeNovo, said that in the commandment where it says, do not commit adultery, that God did not mean that you have to have a monogamous relationship. And then she goes on to clarify, I'm scrolling down here, somewhere down here, I don't remember where it is, but she basically says, oh, I went way past it, and I'll just remember it. She says that also that command didn't take into account things that we now know to be true, like LGBTQ stuff and things like that, which would make that command difficult to follow.
Right.
And so like God wasn't thinking about all that stuff.
What she says is that thou shalt not commit adultery is all about not treating women as property.
Right. We shouldn't treat women as property.
I just say, let's be clear. We are to honor women.
Yes.
And we are to esteem them. God calls them good. God calls women gifts. Like there's all kinds of things. The scriptures teach us that women are a gift, that they are a good thing. They're like,
do you know the very first title that's given to woman is helpmeet. Yeah. And the word helpmeet, a lot of guys like that when they think like, yeah, I got me a helper. But that word is the same word that's used for the Holy Spirit when it says God will send his helper. And the Holy Spirit is actually God.
Yeah.
Pointing that out. So it's not a demeaning term at all.
No, it's not. And so and then she says something about the queer Bible.
Yeah, she's very much into all kinds of sexual deviation. This is what I have found is that people who are into sexual deviation don't want to take any command in the Bible that likes, for lack of a better word, I'll use heteronormativity. And but it's not even that. It's really the marriage thing. It's
if it does
man
not,
and woman married is the only acceptable boundaries for a sexual relationship. Anything that says that or intonates towards that in any way in the Bible, they want to come against and attack it.
You know, I've said before that deviance is anything outside of a husband-wife relationship. It's deviance, meaning it deviates from the norm.
Right.
Right? That's what that means. So anything that is for this kind of situation, for this kind of person, anything that is not deviant is bad.
Yeah.
Right? So they flock to things like the queer Bible and all these because it embraces what we would call deviant and actually turns what we think as we know as the normative to be the deviant.
Yeah.
And it seems like we've read a scripture more than once.
Yes.
In the book of Isaiah.
But we didn't do it in the last episode.
And what is that scripture, Ryan?
They shall call evil good and good evil.
Right.
Yes.
That's exactly what this is.
It is.
And I want to be clear. In no way, shape, or form should we treat women as property.
Correct.
No. That's not where we disagree with her. I agree with her. Women should not be treated as property.
Correct.
Should not.
No.
Where I disagree with her is redefining
God's commandments. Yeah. Well, first of all, the command "do not commit adultery" is not a command about treating women as property. I mean, honestly, it's about saying there should be security within your bounds of your marriage, where neither one of you is worried about the other one stepping out because you're obeying God, not just committing to each other and the vows you made and all that goes with that. You also are obeying God in that law. So there's that. Now, I thought when I first read this article, because her opening stance, if she hadn't have gone into the LGBTQ stuff, her opening stance was that, first of all, because God put the law in there that says do not commit adultery, he's not forbidding polygamy. Because if you're married to them all, it's not adultery, which is, I guess, a sound argument. And the reason why that would be less of a thing is there actually are some believers who have looked at it, and the Bible doesn't have any formal forbiddance towards it. Although there is a command in the Old Testament about do not accumulate wives for yourself, which Solomon and David didn't read. But when you go through the New Testament and you start reading like all of Paul's talks to Timothy and Titus about the requirements of stuff. You should be a husband of a wife, and there's no listing of pluralities within those things for church leaders. But the main thing to me is you have to look at what the example. What is the purpose of marriage, anyways? And I know that there's a lot of different purposes listed in the Bible. It starts off with it's not good for man to be alone. Then there's the whole procreation thing. But the main purpose, the one singular main reason that God set up procreation to happen within marriage and for man to not want to be alone is because marriage serves as an example of the relationship between Christ and the church. Mm-hmm. It is the model. It is the model. And so you have to look at that and go, well, how many Christs are there? There's one. And how many brides does he marry? One. And that's an important thing because we're not multiple churches coming to Jesus. We're one church. We're one kingdom church. And so in that sense, that's the reason why I go for it does mean a monogamous relationship.
Well, I think that, I mean, that's all intriguing initially to talk about, right?
Yeah.
But really it boils down to faithfulness to the marital commitment, right?
Dance with the one who brung you.
And it's like, but if faithfulness to the marital commitment, and using the example that you use, that the marriage relationship is a shadowing of our relationship with the Lord. God's faithful to us.
Right.
Be faithful to your wife.
Yeah. So yes, it is that. But then her saying that also God didn't take into account queerness. I'm going to say, yeah, I agree with you.
100%. God did
not take that into account when making that law because he made other laws forbidding that.
Right.
So
right.
Why would he put that into this law?
Yeah, God's not going to make an exception for something he said is a no-no.
Yeah. So she's looking at this and going, well, if you got married, but that's in deniance of who you believe you really are, that's not really technically an affair. So that's not forbidden by this adultery thing. What? That doesn't make any sense.
That's ridiculous.
And then she would say also, like, an open marriage wouldn't be adultery because if you've agreed then you're not violating any vows, except that you're violating the sanctity of marriage and everything that marriage stands for. You know, you see where the problem is. This is people who want to subvert and misdirect what God is saying.
The problem is, for me, in this, looking at this, it's the explaining away. As soon as we start explaining away what the value of what the Bible and what it's saying and what it means, when we start explaining away, we're devaluing the Bible. And as long as we're devaluing the Bible, we're going to start caring about it less. We're going to start reading it less. We're going to start living by it less. And with all of these, the less value it has, the less focus we put on it, the less all of the things that all of a sudden we're so far from God, we don't even know who he is anymore. And this person, Sherry DeNovo, Dr. Sherry DeNovo, and I'll call her doctor. I'm going to respect her. She earned her title. Dr. Sherry, what she's done is she has devalued it so much she doesn't even understand the words that are written down.
Right. I mean, it's crazy. You would think that something like do not commit adultery should be pretty plain. And the word there that's used for adultery is actually adultery. I mean, it is.
It can't be understood any other way.
Now, if it was in the New Testament, it was written using the word porneia, then you would say that's all sexual immorality.
Right.
But this was Old Testament, and I can't remember the Hebrew word, but I did look it up, and it is specific adultery.
Yes.
I mean, extramarital sexual activity. That would be with anyone of whichever gender, doesn't matter. If it's outside of marriage, it's forbidden. Now, their word for adultery actually does extend a little bit beyond ours, because our word for adultery would mean we would count it as adultery if you are married and you sleep with anyone else, whether they're married or not. That's adultery.
Right.
But would you say, did you commit adultery if you were not married, but you slept with someone who was married? So the Bible would say that's also adultery. That word defines if anybody in any of the parties is married, then adultery has happened. Does that make sense?
It does.
So it does expand it a little bit, and then it also defines adultery as in the New Testament, it breaks it down and calls it fornication, would just be two unmarried people having sex, even if they're in a monogamous relationship.
And to be clear, we're talking about Exodus 20, verse number 14.
Yes.
It says, "You shall not commit adultery."
Mm-hmm.
And there's other places that it breaks it down where it genders things.
Right.
So that it is the generic term where this is clearly being addressed to everyone.
Right.
Don't do this.
Yeah.
So that's another way we can't say that you can't treat women like property. No, there's not a gendering of this. It's don't do it.
Yeah.
None of you. Don't do it.
Yeah. And I was just trying to say, my point was that it's like we're reading it in a very specific context. Like today's version of adultery is if you're married and you go outside of your partner. But their context was a little bit more broad. Not completely broad, but a little bit more broad. And that it would even include unmarried people sleeping with married people, and also two unmarried people sleeping together.
Yeah.
So that's the same word used. So it's just basically it's a command to wait until you get married to have sex, and then
only,
and then dance with the one who brung you.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So yeah, I mean, that's
that's a Petra song.
Yes.
Okay.
But so here it is, plain and simple.
Yeah.
That what the way she's trying to reframe that and reinterpret it, 100% wrong. It really does have to do with a monogamous relationship.
Yes. And it's a monogamous relationship after marriage.
Yes.
So whatever she's saying is wrong. She's wanting to bend the Bible to back up her own beliefs.
Because if we can change this, we can change anything.
In Corinthians, it says a little leaven leavens the whole lump. And the problem is if you allow a false teaching like that to come in, it won't be long until the floodgates are open and all kinds of false teachings come in.
One, when you're sailing a ship and you change your heading by just 1 degree, you're not going to notice it at first. But after you've gone a certain way, you're way off the mark of where you wanted to be.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you were trying to get from here to some port in Europe by boat,
and you change just 1 degree.
Change 1 degree, you're going to miss the continent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you went 1 degree north.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't actually know that much about sailing, so I kind of guessed at that.
Yeah.
But I think it's true.
Well, when you look at it from a mathematical perspective, if you move 1 degree, the further you get away from your origin spot, the further that 1 degree makes sense.
I do know this. When they talk about like sending a rocket to the moon, like tenths of degrees make the matter of missing the entire moon.
Yeah.
So,
So, are we good?
Yeah, I think we're good. So, hey, thank you for watching the Chris and Ryan Credo Report. We are glad that you've joined with us. And we just want to invite you that if you ever have any questions, you can email us at thecredoreport@gmail.com. You can go to our website, credoreport.com, just straight.com.
There you go.
There we have shirts you can buy, a couple anyways.
Yeah.
And a mug. Yeah, mugs. Not these, though. These are made by Scooby.
Yeah, these are made by Scooby. If you want one of those, email me and I'll get you in touch with Scooby.
Yeah, email thecredoreport@gmail.com.
Yes.
Hit us online. Do all the YouTube things that you're supposed to do to
smite, smash.
Yeah, ring the bells. There's a guy that comes to my house who has a child. It's actually the infamous Anthony Donovan. The one that cannot talk like a pirate. Going all the way back to season 1. His son.
We need to have Anthony on and make him try to talk like a pirate.
We ought to. His son cannot enter our house without ringing the doorbell. So what I'm saying is be like Anthony's son and ring that bell so that you get notification. This isn't working, is it?
You lost your way.
Okay. Bye.